Do you think you know Snow White? Well, you don't. At least, not the real one. Everything seemed like a fairy tale ending when the prince kissed Snow White, awakening her from her death-like slumber. Overjoyed, he asked her to marry him, and she said yes. But what happened at their wedding is a tale that few dare to speak of. The kingdom was a spectacle of grandeur. Streets were adorned with flowers, and the castle was illuminated with magical lights. Snow White, dressed in a gown that shimmered like the morning dew, felt a sense of unease as she prepared to walk down the aisle. She dismissed it as mere wedding jitters, but deep down, something gnawed at her. As she stepped into the grand hall, her eyes met those of the prince. He looked dashing, yet his eyes held a glint that she couldn't quite place. For a fleeting moment, everything seemed perfect, a dream come true. But then, her eyes caught a figure standing in the shadows, her stepmother, the evil queen. Her heart sank. The queen's eyes were pools of malevolent darkness, and Snow White knew that her presence was an omen of doom. The ceremony proceeded, and they were declared husband and wife. The prince, his face stern, gave a subtle nod to his guards. They moved with military precision, seizing the queen before she could react. "You are not welcome here," the prince declared, his voice tinged with a chilling coldness that Snow White had never heard before. "For your crimes, you shall be punished." The hall fell into an eerie silence as the guards brought forth a pair of iron shoes, glowing red-hot from the fire. The queen's eyes widened in terror, she knew what was coming. Forced to step into the scalding iron, she let out a scream so agonizing that it reverberated through the very walls of the castle. She began to dance, her body writhing in unbearable pain, each step a symphony of agony. She danced until she could dance no more, collapsing to the ground, her life extinguished once and for all. The crowd erupted in cheers, but Snow White felt no joy. As she looked at the prince, she realized that the man she had married was capable of a darkness just as deep as her stepmother's. And in that moment, she understood that evil is not born, it is made. As they retired to their chambers, Snow White couldn't shake off the feeling that she had entered into a union with a man whose depths she had not fully explored. The prince, sensing her unease, leaned in and whispered, "In this world, my love, you must either conquer or be conquered." Snow White lay awake that night, pondering the events that had unfolded. She knew that her life would never be the same again. She had escaped one form of darkness only to find herself entangled with another. The prince, meanwhile, retreated to a hidden chamber in the castle, a chamber filled with dark artifacts and forbidden scrolls. He unrolled a parchment and began to chant incantations, his eyes glowing with an unholy light. The castle trembled as dark energies swirled around him. "With this spell, I bind you to me, Snow White. Your purity will be the shield that protects me, and your love, the sword that conquers all," he murmured, sealing the incantation with a drop of his own blood. Unbeknownst to him, Snow White had followed him. She watched from the shadows, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and resolve. She knew that she had to act, and act fast. Weeks turned into months, and Snow White began to study the dark arts herself, in secret. She discovered a counterspell that could break the prince's dark enchantment. Waiting for the right moment, she found her opportunity during the annual harvest festival, where the prince would be vulnerable amidst the celebrations. As the prince raised his goblet to toast the kingdom's prosperity, Snow White chanted the counterspell under her breath. The prince staggered, clutching his chest. "What have you done?" he gasped. "I have freed myself, and in doing so, freed you from your own darkness," Snow White replied, her voice steady. The prince looked at her, his eyes filled with a mixture of admiration and regret, before collapsing to the ground, his dark magic consuming him in a final, blinding flash. Snow White ascended to the throne, a queen with the wisdom of someone who had peered into the abyss and survived. She ruled with fairness, but also with the understanding that darkness lurks in every corner, waiting for its moment to strike. And so, they lived happily ever after, but it was a happiness tinged with darkness, a happiness that came at a cost. For Snow White knew that true evil could never be vanquished, only kept at bay, and that knowledge would haunt her for the rest of her days. Snow White became a wise and just ruler, but she was forever changed. She established a secret order of guardians, trained in both the light and dark arts, to protect the kingdom from threats both visible and hidden. Years passed, and tales of Snow White's wisdom spread far and wide. Yet, she never remarried, never sought companionship, for she knew that the complexities of her soul could not be easily understood. She often visited the glass coffin, now a monument in the royal gardens, as a reminder of her journey from innocence to experience. As she grew older, Snow White had the magical mirror from her stepmother's chamber brought to her. She would look into it, not to ask who the fairest of them all was, but to seek counsel on how to combat the ever-present darkness. The mirror, once a tool for vanity, became an oracle of wisdom, its answers cryptic yet enlightening. But even with all her wisdom and power, Snow White knew she was not immortal. As her time drew near, she penned a secret tome, detailing her life's experiences and the lessons she had learned. She entrusted it to the head of her secret order, with instructions to pass it down through generations. On her deathbed, Snow White was not surrounded by family or loved ones, but by her loyal guardians. Her last words were a spell, a final incantation that would imbue her essence into the kingdom itself, providing a layer of protection for years to come. As she breathed her last, a wave of energy emanated from her, sweeping across the kingdom. People paused, feeling a momentary sense of peace and security, not knowing its source, but grateful nonetheless. Snow White's body was laid to rest in a tomb of enchanted glass, similar to the coffin she once lay in. It was said that roses, both white and red, bloomed eternally around her tomb, a symbol of her dual nature, pure yet complicated, light yet dark. And so, the kingdom continued to thrive, but it was a place forever marked by the complexities of good and evil, a place where happiness came at a cost. For the people knew, as Snow White did, that true evil could never be vanquished, only kept at bay. And that knowledge, both comforting and unsettling, would be their legacy, a legacy that began with a simple kiss and ended with a lifetime of duality.